always wanted to go ever since I watched a show, Last Comic Standing, that aired on NBC back in 2003. If I can recall, my family and I would watch that show after dinner. It was a freaking hit with us because we are a family that loves to roast each other while we cry on the inside at night. I just remember some of the comedians being effortlessly funny, and I would always be envious at how quick-witted they were. I was in awe at how they could stand up in front of a crowd, all eyes on them, being confident with their jokes. But there were also some comedians that would dabble along the lines of being offensive, and there were numerous times when I cringed and even felt offended. But I couldn't stop watching, mainly because I wanted to know if people were actually going to vote for the most offensive guy to win. That shock factor. But that's what comedy's all about, right? You can't be offended as long as it's a joke. When I was 19, my friend Jessica invited me to a comedy show. I was super stoked. I even remember what I wore that night. Black skinny jeans with a black v-neck shirt that had 3/4 length sleeves, silver dangly earrings, and army combat boots. I remember looking really fly, especially since it was summertime with my bronzed, tan skin. 19-year-old Reena was poppin'. I wasn't much into the night scene as a typical 19-year-old, I suppose, but I was super excited to go to my first comedy show. We waited in line, and it seemed like a sizable amount of people were getting in that night. The bouncer checked our ID and said, "You guys are not allowed to drink, you know that, right?" "We know, we don't drink anyways." "The show gets a little intense. You sure you can handle it?" Jessica said, "I've been to these shows plenty of times." "Alright, would you ladies like to be up front?" Jessica looked at me, and the bouncer said, "I don't think she'll be able to handle it," motioning to me. "It's actually her first time, so maybe not tonight," Jessica laughed. I was totally clueless as to what was so special about the front row, but I guess it was time to find out. "Enjoy yourself, ladies." He handed back our IDs, and we were welcomed by a blast of cold air when we walked in. They really cranked up the AC that night. We sat down to the left of the stage against a brick wall and settled in. I believe there was a little laminated menu on the table that showed us what we could order in terms of drinks. Jessica and I didn't drink, but it stated that you must purchase 2 drinks minimum. So we ended up ordering double glasses of Sprite for $15 each. What a ripoff. The place was packed. People were chatty and laughing, super engaged with one another, and for once, I felt relaxed within a crowd. It probably had something to do with being against a wall. It just felt safer than being in the middle of the room. Ooh, it's time. They announced the name of the first comedian, and we all gave him a warm welcome of applause. Break a leg. Don't choke now. Uh-oh, here we go. Coming from the crowd. So this dude walks on stage dressed in all black, loose-fitted clothing with messy hair that looked like it hadn't been washed for weeks. Maybe it's just nerves. He acknowledged the supportively teasing crowd clearly felt uncomfortable and humiliated as tears ran down her eyes. I whispered to Jessica, "Is this part of the show?" She shook her head because she was just as shocked and confused as I was. He kept throwing insults at the lady until she yelled, "F you," got up and stormed out. Oh. Let's see who else we got here tonight. There was a Guyanese couple sitting towards the front as well. The lady wore a beige head shawl that had a delicate design on the edges. I remember how the gold trim reflected the lights above the stage. She had on a cream-colored wide-leg pants, looking super modern and chic. She looked so elegant with her husband by her side. You could tell he adored her by the way he looked at her. I thought to myself, that's an attractive couple. I need to find a man that looks at me like this man that looks at his wife. I can't believe I even remember that thought I had. The details are all coming back to me right now. Let's see who else we got here. Where are you guys from? The comedian asked the Guyanese couple. I'm from Chicago, and she's from Toronto. You don't look like you're from Chicago. The husband chuckles. So what do I look like, huh? I'm Guyanese. Is that where you're going with this? Guy, what? You look like those effing terror. Guyanese. It's not that hard to pronounce. And don't you ever call someone that. That's not something to effing joke about, said the husband. I don't give a F. Get the F out of this country. The husband sat up and firmly said, "It is disrespectful to say that to someone. Do not disrespect me or my wife again." He was getting worked up now, but I loved how his wife hardly reacted at all. She still had her legs crossed, sitting elegantly and looking pretty. I think the only reaction she had was blinking, unamused. Do not disrespect me or my wife. But the comedian kept going, and in a millisecond, the husband grabbed the comedian's shirt, ready to swing. Security immediately came in and intervened. They were saying, "Relax, relax, it's part of the show, it's part of the show." The crowd started booing and yelling explicits. "You suck, you effing bum, F you." "It's a joke, man, it's a joke." The comedian put his hand over his heart and repeated, "It's a joke." The husband sat back down, crossed his leg, and allowed this guy to continue. I guess he wanted to see what else this mofo had to say. The comedian scanned the room again and locked eyes with me. Oh, crap. I have Everything happened so quickly. The guy and his husband stepped in front of us to protect us, and a brawl broke out. Next thing I know, the husband asked us if we were okay. We both nodded, both shaken up. Now it was really time to leave, and as we grabbed our things, we were stopped by the bartender. She demanded we pay for our drinks, or she was going to call the cops on us. I think she targeted us because we were the youngest ones there. But Scrappy Jessica yelled, "We are not paying you a dime after we have been attacked by the psycho you hired." Jessica stormed off as she held my arm and pulled me along. The hot summer night's air hit us hard once we stepped outside. I welcomed it because my nerves were on edge and I needed a grounding point. Jessica and I walked to the train station and she apologized for taking me to the show. She told me that's not how comedy shows are at all. I told her it's okay, even though fast forward decades later, I've never been to another comedy show ever since. Now let's talk about using race as the forefront of a joke. There is a respectful way to do that without being derogatory and downright insulting. One of my favorite comedians who highlights race, but in an inclusive way, is Russel Peters. Take notes. He makes the funniest jokes about his own race and culture, as well as other cultures, and he does it in a way that is actually funny. He gets it. The way he incorporates the idiosyncrasies from different cultures without being rude or offensive is, ingenious. his whole show